Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Lahore. I am Fizza Jamal and these are the headlines of this hour. We start from Kashmir, where a delegation led by former Congress chief Rahul Gandhi, who wanted to see the on-ground situation in the valley himself, has been sent back from the airport. Earlier, in an effort to hide its atrocities against Kashmiris, India's government asked opposition leaders not to visit the occupied valley. The Congress party asked, what is the government trying to hide if things are normal in the region? Russia has test-fired 2 ballistic missiles from nuclear-powered submarines in the Arctic Ocean and the Barents Sea. The Defense Ministry said the tests are part of combat training and confirmation of the efficiency of missile systems. Moving on to South Korea, where the military says North Korea has fired 2 more short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast. Expressing strong concern, Seoul's National Security Council urged Pyongyang to refrain from acts that raise military tensions. Despite this being the 7th missile test in a month, U.S. President Donald Trump said the U.S. has a really good relationship with North Korea. Yemen's southern separatists have declared a ceasefire after 2 days of fighting with government forces in Shabwa province. In a statement, the Southern Transitional Council says all parties should exercise restraint and abide by the ceasefire. Brazil has ordered its armed forces to help fight a record number of forest fires in the Amazon. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's orders came after growing international anger over the country's environmental crisis. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron threatened to block a European Union trade deal with South American states, including Brazil. And England have bowled out Australia for 246 runs in the second innings of the third Ashes Test. Marnus Labuschagne was Australia's top scorer with 80 runs. The hosts need 359 runs to win with 2.5 days to spare. These are all for the headlines. Join me after a very short break with our main stories in detail. Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I am Fizza Jamal bringing you our latest stories in detail. A delegation led by former Congress Party chief Rahul Gandhi, who wanted to see the on-ground situation in occupied Kashmir himself, has been sent back from the airport. Earlier, in an effort to hide its atrocities against Kashmiris, India's government asked opposition leaders not to visit the occupied valley. The Congress party asked what the Modi government is trying to hide if things are normal in the disputed territory. It also condemned the communications blackout in the valley. India stripped occupied Kashmir of its special status on August the 5th and placed the valley under a crushing curfew. India's illegal move to change the special status of Kashmir has drastically affected people's lives throughout the disputed territory. And to distract international attention away from its indefinite round-the-clock curfew in occupied Kashmir, India has continuously shelled areas near the line of control. More in this report.
Indian aggression against Kashmiris is being felt on both sides of the line of control. Unprovoked cross-border firing by Indian occupation forces has destroyed homes, schools and hospitals in Azad Kashmir. The people there live under constant threat.
Over there, a curfew has been imposed and people suffer only if they violate the curfew. For us, we are not allowed to have any peace while sleeping, getting up, going to school, going to hospital, running our shops. We want to carry on with life normally, but we cannot do so.
The total communications blackout imposed on occupied Kashmir by India has also had a huge impact on people on the other side of the line of control.
The Indian government has closed all internet systems. For the past 18 to 20 days, no one has had any contact with anyone across the border. Everyone is extremely worried, especially all those on this side who have close relatives on that side.
Agitated by India's unprovoked aggression, the people of Azad Kashmir have become increasingly angry.
By God, I am so agitated that I want to go to Jammu and Kashmir and Srinagar because I see and hear the news daily. And I wonder why those people do not have knives and guns and rifles. If they have arms and they are not restricted to their houses, they will fix Modi.
India is under mounting international pressure to reduce tensions with Pakistan and reverse its illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir.
Pakistan and Chinese air forces have started their annual joint exercise Shaheen-8 in northwest China. This is the 8th exercise of its kind between the two countries since it was first launched in 2011. The Chinese Defense Ministry says the drills will improve training standards of the two air forces. Islamabad says this will also enhance close relations between the two countries. And Russia has test-fired 2 ballistic missiles from nuclear-powered submarines in the Arctic Ocean and the Barents Sea. The Defense Ministry said the tests are part of combat training. The missiles hit targets at training grounds in the northern Arkhangelsk region and on the Kamchatka Peninsula in East Russia. The 45th annual G7 summit will start today in France. Leaders of the world's leading economies are meeting to shape a response to global challenges. The host, President Emmanuel Macron, says he wants member states to focus on the issues of gender inequality, education and climate change. Macron has called for the fires in the Amazon rainforest to lead the summit agenda, calling them an international crisis. He has invited EU officials and leaders from Asia, Africa and Latin America to join the G7 for a global push on these issues. The leaders will also address the escalating trade war between the US and China, the Iran nuclear deal and unrest in Hong Kong. Yemen's southern separatists have declared a ceasefire after 2 days of fighting with government forces in Shabwa province. In a statement, the Southern Transitional Council says all parties should exercise restraint and abide by the ceasefire. The council called on its forces to retain control of the institutions and territory they have seized. The separatist leadership warned against any attacks on Saudi-led coalition forces. The separatists seized the southern port city of Aden earlier this month and last week extended their control to neighboring Abyan. Syrian troops have seized the control of a string of villages in the northern countryside of Hama province. The Syrian military said it took over the formerly rebel-held region for the first time since 2012. The army said troops seized the village of Morek, where Turkey maintains an observation post, pressing ahead its offensive toward Idlib. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the government forces have taken control of the entire northern Hama countryside. Turkey says its forces have launched Operation Claw 3 against Kurdish militants in northern Iraq. Turkey's defense ministry says the operation was launched to provide border security and destroy militant positions in areas around the Duhok governorate. It says 40,000 people have been killed by militants in the last 30 years. The U.S. says it will raise tariffs on Chinese exports worth $250 billion by 5% from October the 1st. In a tweet, President Donald Trump asked U.S. companies to leave China and find alternatives to doing business with Beijing. Trump said the U.S. does not need China because it has lost trillions of dollars in dealings with the country over many years. Reacting to the new tariffs, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said it does not want to see further deterioration of trade relations with China. This comes after Beijing unveiled retaliatory tariffs on $75 billion worth of imports from the U.S. China's Commerce Ministry said punitive tariffs of 5 to 10% will be imposed on 5,000 U.S. goods. Some Chinese tariff hikes will take effect on September the 1st and others on December the 15th. South Korea's military says North Korea has test-fired 2 more short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast. This is the 7th missile test conducted by North Korea in a month. Expressing concern, Seoul's National Security Council urged Pyongyang to refrain from acts that raise military tensions. South Korea's military said it is tracking movements in the north to watch for more launches. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has said he has a good relationship with North Korea's leader.
Kim Jong-un has been, pretty straight with me, I think. And we're going to see what's going on. We're going to see what's happening. He likes testing missiles, but we never restricted short-range missiles. We'll see what happens.
But nuclear talks between the U.S. and North Korea have been stalled since June. Moving on, Hong Kong riot police have fired tear gas and baton-charged protesters as a standoff in a working-class district descended into violence. Thousands of demonstrators wearing hard hats and gas masks marched through the industrial Kwun Tong area. Breaking an uneasy calm that lasted several days, the protesters retaliated with a barrage of stones, bottles, and bamboo poles. The face-off underscored a dangerous deadlock in the city as demonstrators stubbornly refused to leave the streets. The protests started in June against a proposed law allowing extradition to China, but have led to wider calls for democracy and police accountability. Last Sunday, hundreds of thousands of protesters marched peacefully in the city against the recent violence. In Indonesia, 4 people have been killed and another 33 went missing after a passenger ferry caught fire off the coast of Java. Rescue officials say 245 people have been rescued. The ferry was traveling from the city of Surabaya to Balikpapan on the island of Borneo with 280 people on board. The cause of the fire is yet to be determined. Sri Lanka has ended the state of emergency imposed after the Easter Sunday terrorist attacks in April. Sri Lanka's military says the withdrawal of the emergency signifies the return of calm to the country. The emergency law gave security forces extensive powers to detain and interrogate suspects without court orders. Over 250 people were killed and more than 500 wounded in the attacks on churches and hotels in Colombo. The state of emergency has lasted for 4 months since a series of suicide bombings at churches and tourist hotels killed scores of people. Well, now I'll take a very short break, but don't go anywhere because I'll come back with further stories in detail. Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal with our latest stories in detail. Brazil has ordered its armed forces to help fight a record number of forest fires in the Amazon. The order comes after growing international anger over the country's environmental crisis. President Jair Bolsonaro authorized the deployment of soldiers in nature reserves, indigenous lands and border areas in the region. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron threatened to block a European Union trade deal with South American states, including Brazil. But German Chancellor Angela Merkel opposed scrapping the agreement, saying it is not an appropriate response. The European Union is Mercosur's second largest trading partner. The World Health Organization says the year-long Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo has killed nearly 2,000 people. It says 80 new cases were confirmed last week. World Health Organization Executive Director Michael Ryan says the situation remains serious, but he hopes the high number of cases will begin to drop. Ryan says the World Health Organization now has vaccines and effective therapeutics that can change the direction of the Ebola epidemic. This comes after a breakthrough trial for 2 drugs showed a survival rate of 90%.
It has continued at substantial but stable transmission intensity for the past 10 weeks. Since mid-June, we've observed approximately 80 new confirmed cases per week. Cases over the last 2 to 3 weeks have started to reduce, and we hope this trend will continue.
Meanwhile, Congo is taking steps to counter Ebola with the help of the African Union and the United Nations. Moving on, tracing their lineage, Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation aims to find the first African slaves who came to North America. This region was the first permanent English settlement and later became a part of the United States. Details in this report.
The organization digs through what traces remain of the first slaves to land in North America 400 years ago. Originally from the kingdom of Ndongo in what is now Angola, a woman named Angela was loaded onto a Portuguese ship in Luanda. After a terrifying Atlantic crossing, Angela was one of the first African slaves known to reach what is now the United States. The rolling green landscape, which gently slopes towards the James River, is likely to be the one the African slaves first saw when they arrived in August 1619.
The site behind me here is the site where Angela lived, and we're digging square after square on a grid system that was established by the Park Service in the 1930s, and every time we dig, we just take layer after layer down and hopefully get to that 1619 period, and if we find something, then we just open up the squares next to it.
At the time, Portuguese and Spanish slave traders had already been selling Africans as laborers in the Americas for nearly a century. Almost a third of the slaves died on the voyage from Africa because conditions on board ship were so bad. The enslaved Africans arrived shortly after settlers founded the first local legislature on July 30th, 1619, which marks the beginning of a dark period of US history. 250 years of slavery, followed by a long period of racial segregation. The struggle for equal rights continues to this day.
Inequality is so striking even today that has its roots in what began here hundreds of years ago. That's something we need to be aware of to tackle it.
They believe the more data they gather and discourses they arrange, the easier it would be to break with the insidious legacy of the past.
A Russian Soyuz spacecraft carrying a humanoid robot has failed to dock with the International Space Station. The robot, named Fedor, was sent to the International Space Station on a 2-week mission to support the crew and test its own skills. NASA says the docking process failed because of issues related to the automatic docking system. The Soyuz spacecraft is currently in orbit about 96 meters away from the space station. This is the first ever robot sent to space by Russia. Well, the latest update we have for you in the world of business is that in France, European Council President Donald Tusk has warned that America's escalating trade skirmishes with China and Europe can land world economies in a recession. After arriving in France for a G7 summit, Tusk also said it is hard to imagine the bloc ratifying its trade pact with South America's trade alliance, Mercosur. This comes as Brazil seemingly fails to curb fires ravaging the Amazon rainforest. Tusk says the European Union is ready to offer financial help to battle the inferno. Earlier, French President Emmanuel Macron said the G7 should hold emergency talks on the Amazon fires. European leaders are using the summit to push for action against fires in the Amazon, despite the Brazilian president complaining of external interference. And international financial markets have taken a big hit following the latest escalation of the trade war between the US and China. Wall Street indices led by the tech-heavy Nasdaq sunk by up to 3% after Beijing and Washington exchanged tariff hikes. Stock markets in France and Germany also lost more than 1%. Oil prices plunged 2.5% on fears the trade war escalation could push the global economy into recession. Investors looking for a safe haven have piled their money into precious metals, boosting the prices of gold and silver by 2%. Meanwhile, Chinese technology giant Huawei says the U.S. trade restrictions' impact on its business will be smaller than initially feared. However, the restrictions could lower revenue from the company's smartphone unit by $10 billion just this year. Huawei's $100 billion business has been hit hard since mid-May after Washington put it on a blacklist. The restrictions have barred Huawei from using essential U.S. components and technology. At a news conference in Shenzhen, Huawei Deputy Chairman Eric Xu said the sales crisis has improved. Previously, company sales had fallen by 40%. In cricket, England have bowled out Australia by 246 runs in the second innings of the third Ashes Test at Headingley. Marnus Labuschagne is Australia's top scorer with 80 runs. Ben Stokes was pick of the bowlers with 3 for 56. The hosts need 359 runs to win with 2.5 days to spare. England were bowled out for only 67 runs in the first innings. The visitors lead the Ashes 1-0 after their win in the first Test. Now on to football. Aston Villa have collected their first Premier League points of the season after beating Everton by 2-0 in Birmingham. The victory moves Aston Villa up to 11th place in the points table. Striker Wesley Moraes opened his account in English football with a close-range finish in the 21st minute of the match. Villa midfielder Anwar Al Ghazi sealed the victory after scoring a whistle-beating goal. The Villains will play their next match against Crewe on Tuesday. As the weather in Lahore has major mood swings from sunny to rain and rain to sunny, let's see what the weather is looking like where you live. These are all the main stories in detail I have for you this hour. For further updates, stay tuned to Indus News.